Peace. So I wanted to go in, pardon, today about one of the books, um, this anthology that was an inspiration for me, you know, in general from fantasy, to do my own anthology. And it's actually a pretty major anthology. It came out when I was in high school, the first one. So a lot of people, it's interesting that, around that time, my time in high school, a lot of anthologies were popping off. Actually, a lot of anthologies, a lot of single fantasy stories have been popping off, forever. It seems like in the 80s, late 80s, a lot of anthologies popped off. People got together, created shared worlds, and got busy. So this one, Liavec, I don't know how well you can see that, was real inspirational to me. The reason why, for a couple of reasons. One, the setting was in kind of like a Arabian Nights, 1001 Arabian Nights, East African kind of setting, if you can tell by the cover. And so that was like totally different because everybody, in fantasy overall was doing that European medieval age kind of stuff. Like Lord of the Rings and all that kind of shit. So that was one thing. Two, this book, it was one of the first ones where, so the population of the city Liavec, right? The population was described as brown skin. In the appendix, they get like the history of the city and all that kind of shit. They were described as brown skin, and the original inhabitants that lived a little further north were black skin. So once again, black and brown. It was like one of the first times that, in a fantasy novel that I had really, really seen that. And I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and shit, and all that shit was all like, white elves and doors, and it was always white, you know what I'm saying? But that was one of the first ones. I mean, there's some other books that, were big in my development in terms of fantasy that had black characters, A Wizard of Earthsea, you can see it right here. Can't tell on the cover. Yet, once again, the main populations were described as brown skin, and there were other populations that were described as black skin. That shit was never being done in fantasy. And the author of this one, Ursula K.L. Le Guin, she's the shit. She's a white woman. Yet the science is that she's like well known in fantasy and sci-fi. She's like a legend, actually, but she always is big on different ethnic groups and different cultures and shit. Like she's big on that. So much that when they adapted this for the Sci-Fi Channel, she was like, I have to disown that shit because they put a whole bunch of white people up there, and that's not how I described them in my book. Like, she went ill on them. Another book, this one right here is like the father of black fantasy. Charles Saunders, he basically is the father of what's called Sword and Soul. So this is his first book, Gomorrah, and this came out like in the early 70s and everything, and his setting was like a fantasy Africa, but that first book, Liavec, this is the book right here that really, really got me thinking to do an anthology. And it's inspirational on another level that it's a city. And so that was using a city as a setting was something, that, totally spoke to me, because that's, world building, like in Dungeons and Dragons and shit like that, So, yeah, that's just a little insight, to, things that are going into Gomorrah. All right, peace.